For this video, Art 1, I am going to show you how you would begin the line, color, and value option. Now, as you may recall, hopefully, from the video and voiceover, you will be required to use a color scheme for this particular project. So we will be talking about the color scheme a little bit later, but right now what I want to focus on is getting this type started where everything is a little bit stacked, and we will talk about getting a more sort of random one begun as well. That way you can do either option if this is the project that you pick. So we'll do this one first because it is a little bit easier and definitely a lot easier to sort of wrap your head around. So as with pretty much every project in here, you will begin with me giving you a piece of paper so that you have the paper that you'll need. For this particular project, I tend to turn my page horizontally. So I'm going to also turn the camera horizontally so that it is sort of in the correct orientation for my paper here. Sorry about that. Just trying to adjust it as best I can. So I know it's not going to be perfect, but at least now you can see the entire page and it's in the direction that I find easiest to work. So your first step is going to be to draw sort of a wavy line across the middle somewhere. It does not have to be perfect. It does not have to be smack in the middle. It does not have to be any type of wave or not. Now keep in mind as we go throughout this demo, you definitely want to draw your lines more lightly than what I will be doing, because I am drawing my lines a little bit darker so that you can see them better on the page. So now there are two ways from here to go about this project. One of those ways looks something like this, where you start with these sort of wavy vertical lines that will be approximately perpendicular to your horizontal line. The other way looks more like this, where we use hash marks to divide where those sort of columns, so to speak, are going to be starting. I personally find both ways work, and it's really just up to you as to which way you prefer. This way will help your columns definitely all be on the page because you get to dictate exactly where they go a little bit more. This one will allow for more random, like pinching off and things like that. So it depends on whether you want sort of consistent columns or whether you want more wonky sort of Alice in Wonderland columns. So I'm going to show you both ways, and then that way you can pick. So I'm going to show you first by drawing those sort of wavy lines that go up and down. So there's no real number of lines that you need. There's no real right or wrong to it. You do want to make sure that some areas are thinner and some areas are thicker. So try to make those lines at least interesting. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I would say anywhere from 5 to 6 lines is generally going to be pretty successful, because then you'll have at least 6 columns. So then your next step, once you have that done, is just pick a spot and start with a curve that goes up and goes all the way across to the next line. So it's going to go up all the way across to the next line. So the key to this is making sure that all of your curves, your bands, so to speak, come and go to the same point. You want it to look like they could each be starting and stopping at the same point. You do not want something like this to happen, where it looks like things are starting to cut themselves off and they're not all a continuous column, so to speak. You want it to eventually look like your columns are all starting and stopping on the same edge. So So I'm just going to finish this column out a little bit. So as you have probably guessed, all of your curves on the top half are going to be going up in each column, and all of the curves on the bottom half, which is under your wavy line, will be scooped downward. So that once we add the value and the shading later on, it'll really reinforce the volume of those bands, which will sort of turn the columns into forms rather than just little shapes on the page. So that would be how that one would start, and then the next one I would go over. Again, I'd be curving up, coming back to my point, up, all the way down, up, and across. Now again, make sure that you are drawing much lighter than where I am. Some people find that it's helpful to sketch their line more like this, and that's perfectly fine. A lot of times I will sketch my lines as well. I've just done this project several times now, so sometimes I don't necessarily feel the need to as much. For a lot of people, though, sketching their lines out like this will help them better make sure that they are all on the same sort of point there. And again, you can turn the page. As you'll see in a second, I tend to draw my curves better going up, like how I currently am. So a lot of times when I get to that second half, where they're supposed to dip down, I will literally just turn my page so that I am still drawing my curves going up rather than down. But it still creates that flip effect because it is essentially going in the opposite direction. I've just turned my page so that I can keep drawing in the same direction because that's just easier for me. It's all about working smarter so that you can also work better and put more effort forth in areas where more effort is needed. So essentially you would just keep doing this on all of the different columns. Some people like to go one column at a time and do both the upper half and the lower half. That's perfectly fine. If you would prefer to do all of the upper halves and then go back and do all of the lower halves, that's perfectly fine too. So that would be one column. This is half of a column, and then these columns would then get the same treatment. So now I'm just going to flip my page and show you how you would start if you're just using the little hash marks. So if you're just using the hash marks, you still start with the line somewhere near the middle, but then you just put random little hash marks, some closer together, some further apart. There's actually no measuring for this because those hash marks will then eventually become your columns. So at this point, I have my hash marks and I have my line. So I'm just going to pick a spot. I'm just going to start here. So this one is a little bit more challenging, and I do tend to sketch more on this one because I don't have those guidelines to help me as much. Because for this one, it's really about where the line sort of goes on its own. You do have some control over it. So now I'm just going to make it get wider up here so that you guys can see that. So you can see it's all still one connected column, but now it's starting to get wider again. Now I'm going to let it kind of get more to a consistent width. And then it's just going to eventually get off the page up here. So once again, you can do all of the upper halves and then go down. You can continue this one down. You can flip the page and finish the other end. I do recommend, however, I have just found it more successful if you do not do one of the columns directly next to this one. So I'm going to skip that, turn my page just a little bit so that the curves are easier for me, and then I'm going to go ahead and go to the next area. Because what this is going to do is kind of force this column to become its own thing, because I'm not going to have as much control over that column. So again, you're going to be drawing all of these lines quite lightly, because we will be going over these pencil lines with ultrafine tip Sharpie, and then we will be erasing the pencil lines and adding color. So as you see here, I'm just going to sort of make my little column tip over a little bit. Because now this column has to fill in that space. So it forces you to have a more interesting column. So in the next video, I'm just going to sort of show you some more of the columns in both ways. I'll work in one way for about half of the video, and then I will flip my paper and work in the other way for the other half. And then I'll do a whole separate video for showing you guys how to get the sort of random style like what you see here going.